Welcome, listeners, to the Teacher Think-Aloud podcast 2024 Friends of the Podcast.
Woo!
In this year's episode, we're focusing on the trendiest of trending topics in English language teaching, generative AI.
No avoiding it, really.
Nope. So I'm your co-host, Shay.
And I'm Anna.
And this episode is really shaped around the real-life experiences of English language teachers. We'll be covering why teachers have been so hesitant to use AI, their ideas for using it in the classroom, and so much more. We hope you'll appreciate it.
Yeah, and we hope you weren't too annoyed with us, listeners. we pushed really hard to get you to submit ideas on this topic. And we discovered that everyone is a procrastinator naturally and does things right up until the deadline.
Well, we know everyone is busy, especially at the end of the year. So we really appreciate everyone who contributed. It's all come together beautifully, I think.
It has. So before we dive into our conversation, as usual, let's get started with a little moment of physical expression. You ready for our theme song?
Oh, yes, yes. Just gonna do the wave the whole time this time. Waving.
All right. Yeah,
okay.
Just as awkward as last time we did this on camera,
I tried a new technique. I don't know. I didn't feel very awkward. But anyway, listeners, thank you for indulging us. Now let's get into it. It took some time after ChatGPT hit the scene in 2022 for teachers really to warm up to this technology, right?
Yeah.
Let's hear about why some friends you may already know and some fresh new voices we want to introduce you to.
Our first guest, Anna Arapetyan, teaches English at 2 universities in Yerevan, Armenia. Let's hear from everyone.
As far as artificial intelligence and its implementation in teaching are concerned, I must admit that initially I was intimidated. I first learned about ChatGPT this year in Dubai at TESOL Arabia annual conference. There were plenty of presentations and discussions on it and its magical abilities. I was amazed and shocked, to be honest. The first thought that I had was, where are we all going to? What is going to be with us, with our students, with the future of humanity, with our mental and cognitive skills, if there is something that can perform things better than some of us do? Many brain specialists claim that we should constantly challenge our brain to do something difficult, such as reading complex books or texts, solving different tasks, and so on. And I still have a strong belief that if we keep counting on artificial intelligence and refer to it every time we have something to create, and if we stop putting pressure on our mind, our brain and our neurons will sooner or later lose their primitive abilities and skills. Thus, I was never tempted to use ChatGPT, and I prefer to do written tasks myself.
Hello to the Teacher Think Aloud podcast and listeners. My name is Kyla McMillan. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an English language fellow and lecturer in Tbilisi, Georgia. I teach oral communication skills, academic writing, phonetics, and methods of thesis writing at International Black Sea University. I primarily work with first-year undergraduate English philology students. It was certainly hard to ignore the headlines of doom and gloom that described ChatGPT and other generative AI programs that started to pop up at the beginning of the year last year. I was worried about the impact it might have on my classes and on my students. In the past, I'd had a lot of trouble dealing with plagiarism in my writing classes. So the prospect of generative AI seemed like the next big hurdle. But after trying to ignore it for some time, I realized that I better dive in and try to figure it out. So last year, I downloaded ChatGPT and played around a bit. I started by entering some of the writing prompts I usually give my students. I thought that because my writing prompts drew on my students' creativity and personal stories, that they would be immune from AI. But I was surprised and a little scared by the output. It wasn't amazing, but it was fast, and it was better than the writing from some of my students.
Yikes.
I could see how it would be tempting to students. And although there were some ways to detect if AI had been used, none were exact, and that was worrisome.
I'm Heather McNaught. I'm a full-time instructor and administrator at a university-based IEP in the U.S. So I have just started using ChatGPT. A couple reasons for that. One is I'm not usually an early adopter of anything new.
Yeah, it's
I'm
hard.
busy with everything in my life, and I feel like I don't need something extra, something new in my life. I just didn't want to take the time to learn something new. And I've been focused more on the aspect of students using it to cheat rather than how I can incorporate it into my teaching and make my life faster, better, easier.
This voice comes from the Republic of Georgia, and I am Ekaterina Pipia. I go with the pronouns she and her. I am a professor in education at the International Black Sea University, Tbilisi, Georgia. I feel confident in using ChatGPT for my teaching purposes, but it did not feel safe when I heard about this tool. It was scary, lots of ambiguities, but then started to investigate the tool, and bingo, this could be very helpful and effective if tailored to your educational needs.
Sure.
Hello, my name is Dustin. He, him, his.
Hi,
I'm a
Dustin.
4th grade teacher in Michigan. I also call Korea home because it was my home for 15 years. My students are neighborhood kids. There's a couple that come from other countries, and so they're on the ELL track, but mostly just neighborhood kids. And I do use AI. I don't use it as much as maybe other teachers do, but I chalk that up to me not being exposed to what all it can do. And I'm more focused on just trying to get my classroom going well and having fun with that. So if I knew more about AI, I could definitely use more AI.
Awesome. So interesting to get the pulse on teachers' initial reactions to generative AI.
Yeah, there's a lot of skepticism here, and justifiably. I mean, the concern about plagiarism that several people voiced just now, I think that's really at the core of a lot of debates about AI.
For sure. And it is something we need to look out for, right? I also think Anna's concern is fairly common. Many of us had this knee-jerk reaction when ChatGPT first got popularized. Like, oh man, like where does that leave us? What's happening in the world? You know, with AI thinking for you, our mental faculties are just going to devolve, right?
Yeah, it's easy to think that way. I think it's natural too. I have to remind myself always that people have had this concern for centuries, though, anytime a new piece of technology has come out.
Right. I mean, this isn't the first time that we've been faced with a technological change, though AI, arguably, well, it's a different beast, right?
Yeah. And it's an intimidating beast, you know. I appreciate how candid Heather, Eka, and Dustin were. You know, Eka mentioned she didn't feel safe. It was scary initially. And Heather and Dustin mentioned how they felt they really didn't have time to learn it, or just generally aren't early adopters of technology.
Yeah, it takes a lot of effort, and teachers are already overloaded.
Yeah.
But I like that our friends have a positive outlook. You know, they really felt that they just needed more time to explore AI.
Yeah. So how did teachers fare over time? First, we'll hear from Heather and Kyla about what led them to change their mind about AI. And then we'll introduce a returning podcast guest, Alex, and his thoughts on why we need to know about AI.
So I've had 3 pushes just in the very recent past that have got me started incorporating AI, or at least thinking about how to use ChatGPT in my teaching. So the first was I listened to the amazing podcast, Bring Your Teaching Alive with ChatGPT. And as soon as Jeff said I could use it to plan an itinerary for a trip, I was like, well, yes, of course, sign me up. And I used it to plan an itinerary for a trip that I have coming up with my friends, and they were so excited about it. It was great. It was perfect. And then I had a workshop in my department here at the university that was about incorporating ChatGPT into your teaching and how we can use it as teachers to make our lives faster, better, easier. It was a great workshop. I got some really nice ideas, and also So my students were asking me, hey, Heather, we're going to be using this in our future. And you're just telling us, don't use it, don't use it, don't use it. What you should be doing is teaching us how to use it. So all of those were big motivators. And I'm starting to look for next semester, if I'm teaching technical writing again, for activities for them to benefit from using AI in their writing, because they're right, they're going to be using it for the future. So I'm looking forward to how I can incorporate ChatGPT into my life as a teacher and my life as a person who likes to travel and do other things.
So having realized that I needed to dive further into this new frontier, I began reading all those articles with all those headlines. As time went on, the tone of the articles had shifted as instructors began to think of ways to use this technology rather than run from it. Many of the articles described ways you could use it, so I tried them out. I then surveyed my present and past students to get an idea of their interaction with AI, and found that the majority of them hadn't actually heard of it. That is until I introduced them to it. But I think it was important for teachers to get ahead of it. So I discussed it in class and asked my students what they thought. We talked about ethical ways of using AI so that students would know that instead of using it to cheat, they could use it as a learning tool, one that would proofread their essay, offer them writing topic suggestions, or become a real-time debate partner. To any teachers that are interested in using AI in their classroom, I suggest that you first discuss it with your students. Tell them what it can and can't do, and get their opinion on how they think they might be able to use it to help themselves rather than cheat.
It's important.
Aloha, my name is Alex Tang. I use
Alex.
he, him pronouns. I am located in Honolulu, Hawaii, USA. And my current teaching context is teaching multilingual adult learners of English, as well as multilingual Chinese foreign language learners. I think language teachers shouldn't be skeptical with using AI because we need to learn more how to prompt AI. We need to increase our AI literacy. And I think just trying to use tools like ChatGPT or PDF.ai would alleviate most of the fears that we have. I think there are a lot of language teachers who just think, oh, this is a tool that students are using to cheat. Well, not really, because using Microsoft Word or even Google Docs, there's AI in there. It will correct your grammar based on large language models that they've learned from. Maybe even check your spelling too, and trying to guess on what word you're using. So it's trying to predict what kind of language you're using. So that in itself is a version of AI.
Yes.
Such great points here. I mean, first, starting from the end, we're already using AI in the applications we rely on. Like whenever your phone or Google suggests a word, or if you talk to an automated chatbot on a website, I mean, that's already AI.
Yeah. And also, students are going to be using AI regardless of whether we do as teachers, right?
Yeah.
I really like Kyla's idea that we should explore AI with our students and provide guidance beforehand. Right?
Yeah, get ahead of it, so to speak.
And I like Alex's point about the importance of developing AI literacy and knowing how to prompt. We talked about prompt engineering with Jeff in episode 48, which thank you, Heather, for dropping that episode name in your contribution.
Yeah,
we're glad that it was helpful in shaping your thought process around AI. But yeah, so Alex actually had a great suggestion on how to improve our AI literacy. He mentioned a website that some students at the University of Hawaii developed where they provide guidelines on how to craft prompts.
Oh yeah, and he did share that link with us too, so we'll put that in the show notes for you listeners. And it kind of made me think of the prompt library that AI for Education has put out there, which is amazing. It's a fantastic resource. The prompts are categorized by area, like assessment, lesson planning, social emotional learning, and each entry has a prompt template, an example prompt, and tips for making the prompt work best for your needs as a teacher.
Yeah, if you haven't looked at it before, listeners, please do. It's such a great resource to get started with prompt engineering, which is often, I think, the biggest learning curve.
Yeah. So next, let's talk about what I think is the most common use of AI for idea generation, lesson planning, materials development. We'll hear from Eka, Alex, and Anna again, and then we'll bring some old and new friends into the mix.
But I would love to share my own examples, primarily to introduce intentional errors within written paragraphs, to engage my students in identifying mistakes. By employing this technique, I redirect the focus towards the specific errors that students commonly make, allowing them to actively practice correction with the assistance of AI. And the tool facilitates a personalized, efficient, and effective learning experience by pinpointing the exact language issues students grapple with. One of the particularly advantageous applications of using ChatGPT in my teaching context is its capability to generate writing samples tailored to different language proficiency levels. Yeah, time saving, definitely.
For sure.
An activity that I've used is actually generating a lesson plan on business communication. And what it did was actually was quite specific. I was wondering if it could help me with modalities in the business communication setting with English. And it was great. And I like to use PDF.ai for quick summaries if I need to do some reading. It's really great with you asking questions to ChatGPT. It uses the ChatGPT large language model. And the cons is that it's kind of, you're not really reading the PDF or whatever document you are trying to get information from. So you might miss some crucial details if you're not specific with the prompt.
Given that besides teaching general English, I also prepare students for international language exams such as TOEFL and IELTS, I noticed that my students managed to get higher scores in reading, listening, and speaking, but they underperformed in writing. They couldn't get anything higher than 22 out of 30. But the biggest issue was that I couldn't understand what my students and I were doing wrong. I followed the rubric on the website. I taught my students to use complex grammar constructions, extensive vocabulary. I read recommendations. However, the results were the same. And once I shared this concern with one of my colleagues, and she just advised me to ask ChatGPT. And so it gave me some insights on what to work on. There were some aspects of writing that I didn't pay much attention to just because I was not aware of their significance. I shared this information with my students, and just recently one of them took the exam and got 25 out of 30. Yay. Of course, it's not 30. We still have something to improve, but it's much better than 22.
Excellent. I'm Eja Ulus. My pronouns are she and her, and I teach English as an additional language in the U.S. I tried ChatGPT when it first came out to see what kind of ideas it could generate for our podcast, English as a Singing Language. I first asked it to suggest good songs to practice English. It gave several okay suggestions with reasons why they might be good, such as easy to understand lyrics, or it's clear to understand, or it has a catchy tune. But then I also asked it to give suggestions for heavy metal songs to practice English. And it gave a couple songs from heavy metal groups like Metallica, but it also suggested songs like Hotel California. It did acknowledge that these other songs weren't by heavy metal groups, but they were still good to practice English.
Hello, Teacher Think Aloud podcasters. My name is Kim Carroll.
Hi,
My
Kim.
pronouns are she and her, and I live in the United States. This past semester, I was teaching English to international college students at the intermediate and advanced level. And for the first time, I used some AI both in preparation and in my class. In preparing lessons, I found two programs that have been really helpful to me to create activities really quickly, to give my students extra practice and to work together. The first is Brisk, and it sits right on top of your Google Drive. I use it to help create leveled readers. So, for example, if you find something on the internet that you want your students to read, like let's say a blog post, but it's too long or the vocabulary is too hard, you can just paste it into a Google Doc and use Brisk to make it a little bit easier to read or make it shorter or change it in a number of ways.
That's great.
So with that, I'm able to have multiple copies of more or less the same reading for students that are at different levels in my class.
Excellent.
The other one I like for preparation is called TWEE, Twee. As far as I can tell, it's developed for English teachers. There are really easy and quick ways to write dialogues, do vocabulary practice. It works with YouTube videos so that you can create discussion or comprehension questions by just plugging in the URL of the YouTube video. It has video to text feature. I like it because I can provide extra practice for my students to do at home that we don't have time to do in class. For example, if there's vocabulary words that they need to practice, I can simply go into TWEE and say, please, I need a reading that is 3 paragraphs long that includes these 7 vocabulary words on the topic of shopping. And then it will ask, what do you want it to be? Do you want it to be a letter or an email or a complaint? And it'll put it right into a specific context. So this makes my life easier as a teacher, and it saves me time and allows me to provide my students with really specific things that are perfect for them in the chapter we're on, in the level that they are at.
That's great.
Hi, I'm Ann Haggerson, and I am a virtual educator. I work with pre-service teachers in Mexico, and I also coach TOEFL and IELTS students, and I have my own one-on-one students, and I live in Spain. So I've been using AI with one of my teenage students, and it's been working very well. I got the idea from Nick Peachy in one of his webinars, and it's the idea of creating your own adventure story. So I've used ChatGPT to create little adventures, and every time the student comes to one of my classes, there's a segment of the story, and she gets to choose A, B, or C. So it's like she's choosing the next part of the adventure, and it started out as this great mystery where she kind of went into this closet. There was a magic glowing key, and it took her to this underground world. And then she got to choose a companion to accompany her. And then I've been using AI generated images to accompany the story and the different options. So she's also matching, like, okay, this option goes with this picture. And she can kind of, look at the pictures, describe them. And it's been a wonderful way to just create a sense of consistency, pleasure, and enjoyment, because she knows that when she comes, she's going to read the story. And it's part of our classroom routine.
Nice.
So I think it's worked really well with a one-on-one student, especially a teenager. It's been helping her with her reading skills, with her vocabulary, and whatever she's working on in the classroom, then I could bring that in the story as well. So maybe she's working on a lot of, many, and then in the story, I might use that language as well. So it's very creative. It's much faster, obviously, to use AI for a story like that than for me to write it up myself. And the images, are really bright and colorful and so mysterious as well.
Yeah. Okay. Pause for a second. These educators are just so amazing and creative.
Oh my gosh, so great. I love them all.
Yeah, I especially love Anne's choose your own adventure story with her teenage student.
Yeah, so cool. Imagine how labor intensive also it would be to generate all of those alternative scenarios for her story without the support of ChatGPT or another generative AI, application.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that most teachers wouldn't even venture to try an activity like this because how long it would take, right?
Yeah, forever.
I've used ChatGPT to create case studies and dialogues for business English students that I've worked with in China.
Yeah, just goes to show what a great time-saving tool AI can be. And I also love that many of our listeners brought up apps other than just ChatGPT, like PDF.ai or Brisk, which is just an add-on for Google Docs, and TWEE.
I love TWEE, and I can't wait to experiment more with it.
Yeah, ChatGPT is so popular that we often use it as sort of an umbrella term for all AI tools. But there's just so much out there. I really encourage educators to get acquainted with different tools and find the ones that suit them best. We'll link the ones mentioned on this episode in the show notes, of course.
Yeah. And speaking of different tools, I love Anne's mention of AI-generated images for her story project.
So cool.
We actually had another really great idea for using image generators from another contributor who we'll hear from in a sec.
Yes, our friend Clara from Bogota, Colombia says, I have looked for innovative ideas for my lesson plans, but I haven't used AI with my students in class. I would like to know how other teachers have taken advantage of this resource in class with their students. So let's hear from one last new friend and a few other guests about how they use AI, not just for lesson planning, but also to engage students.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Johanna Gleason. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm from the United States. The AI I'm going to talk about I used when I was teaching in the virtual educator program with the State Department. My regular job is working with immigrants and refugees, newcomers to the country who are very, very low level English, pre-literacy, pre-digital literacy. So I don't use AI with those students. And yes, I have used AI. My favorite activity is to use the Bing image generator. And I like to try to get the students to use their English to make it create an image they want to see. So maybe we'll decide on an image together, and then they can type to tell it what they want to see, and then they have to refine. Lovely. For example, we looked at a picture of the Mona Lisa, and we wanted the Bing image generator to recreate the Mona Lisa. So the students had to use their language to tell it what to do, like put a woman with nature in the background. She needs to look medieval. She needs long hair. We need to see her hands. They had to go on and say things like that.
The AI that I use in the classroom currently, there's an app called Amira that my students read to, and it uses AI to check it's basically a running record for it. And it gives them feedback on their reading. It says how many words per minute, all that stuff. And the other ones that I use are a couple of websites like 99 Math, where students go on it, and it's kind of game learning, but it takes whatever answer. If the kid answers very quickly but wrong, maybe it goes to a little bit of an easier question next time. If the kid answers quickly and correct, maybe it goes to a harder one. So it's making all these decisions while the kids are playing the game, and it keeps the kids engaged. Because if a test is too easy, kid's just gonna go, it's too easy. Or if it's too hard, I give up. But the AI in these websites will see what the kids are doing and adjust accordingly, and it's been a great help.
In class, I've also used ChatGPT just a little bit. I have a hesitation in using it just because I'm a new user, and I want to show them ways to use it responsibly, to not abuse it, and really to use generative AI to become better learners and better language speakers.
Of course.
In this past semester, we had a unit on shopping. There was a great activity that I really wanted to do with my class, which was to come up with a problem that is a typical problem that people have related to shopping. And then they had to work in groups and create some sort of app that would solve the problem. I love the activity idea, but it seemed like it would take a really long time, and my classes are really short. And so I wanted to find a way to shorten the activity. I used ChatGPT for the brainstorming function. I used it on my own as an example. And then in the class, I asked my students if they ever used ChatGPT, and they looked at me like they didn't really want to tell me they did. And I said, I hope you do, because we're going to use it in class today. I showed them the answers that I got, and I told them they could use my answers, or they could put in their own question, their own query, and make it more specific to what they're talking about. So each group used ChatGPT for the brainstorming aspect of the activity that we were going to do. The cool part was they continued using it throughout the activity to be even more specific and to get more ideas.
Well,
One group came up with a really great name for their app, and when I commented how great it was, they said, "Yes, teacher, we used ChatGPT to come up with the name, and we didn't know that word, so we had to look it up." So they actually were learning new vocabulary from their interactions with ChatGPT. And we were able to complete this activity, which was focused on problem solving, critical thinking, working together as a team, and it got done much quicker because they used the prompts and used the brainstorming features by integrating ChatGPT.
I discovered that one of the most interesting things that ChatGPT could do was to pretend to be someone else so that you could set up and carry out a role play with it. Some of the ideas I read online suggested having ChatGPT act as a historical figure and then ask them questions about their life. I could see how this would be a useful activity for students, and I've kept it in the back of my mind. But the chance to introduce it in class hasn't arisen.
Okay. Yeah, I like the idea of role plays with historical figures. That's pretty unique. Thanks for the idea, Kyla.
Yeah, thanks. And working backwards, I love that Kim sees the potential of students using ChatGPT and other large language models for brainstorming and also vocabulary building. I also see it fitting in at the other end of the process when students get to revise their work.
For sure.
With writing assignments, I've worked with students to ask it for feedback on specific areas of cohesion, coherence, forming logical appeals, etc. And ChatGPT acted as sort of a post-peer review tool for students to really drill down on areas that we weren't able to cover, super in depth. A supplement to what we were already doing in class. It was brilliant.
Yeah, that is brilliant. Dustin also brought up two great AI-based applications, Amira and 99 Math. Adaptive applications like this really help to challenge learners in the right way.
And finally, Johanna's idea, so good. Having students use Bing Image Generator to practice writing prompts to get the results that they're looking for in an image. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's hard to teach how to describe visual elements. So this really is a great exercise to get students to learn descriptive vocabulary, right?
Yeah. I mean, I also just, as an aside, I love playing with Bing Image Generator. Maybe I shouldn't share this, but I've spent way more time than I should have getting Bing to generate cartoon images of my cat, Jiggy. Here you go. Do you like them?
Listeners, do you like them? Or viewers, do you like them? Anna's already shown these to me as I receive WhatsApp messages with these images. Yes, Anna, you are too much.
Well,
or
listen,
enough. You're enough.
Listen, I've embraced my crazy cat lady, and they took a lot of fine tuning. I mean, this would be a great way to get learners to practice their English skills.
I'm sure. Yeah. But Johanna also said something that I found really interesting, which is that she's doing this with her higher level students, not with her low level students. So there is a time and a place for AI, for sure. It isn't always appropriate to use with our students.
Definitely. And I think that while all our friends recognize the incredible benefits of generative AI, they also understand its limitations, the importance of teaching students to use it responsibly, and also just academic integrity.
Yeah.
I tried ChatGPT when it first came out. I was teaching a writing class for low advanced learners of English. And at that point, with a few exceptions, students were either unfamiliar with it or had no idea about it. So I wanted to try some prompts that I thought my students might write if they were familiar with it, such as write a 5-paragraph essay about X. And then I made some versions of the prompt and then showed the results to my students. And we looked at them to show and discuss what ChatGPT can do well and how that can help them with their writing, such as understanding the structure of a 5-paragraph essay, for example. But we also looked at what it couldn't do, such as provide specific examples and appropriate or accurate sources.
If you ask me what I would recommend to teachers, I would say that we shouldn't be wary of technologies. They have become an indispensable part of our daily life, and it would be naive to pretend that we can do without it. But as they say, each medal has two sides. We should know how to use it, and we must use technology wisely. I would discourage students and teachers to use artificial intelligence just because they feel reluctant to think about the problem, or they don't feel like writing a lesson plan, for example, and they simply ask ChatGPT to do it for them.
Yeah, no
First,
cutting corners.
put an effort and try to solve an issue, and only after multiple failures, refer to ChatGPT for a recommendation. Don't ask it to solve a problem for you. Remember, it is a tool which you can use properly or misuse it.
Sure.
The positive ways that ChatGPT could be used in the classroom are sure appealing, but I found that it's fallen by the wayside. The technology that we thought would completely change the education system as we know it now seems like just another fad. But one thing I was reminded of is that as much as things change, they stay the same. Students will still be students. A classroom will still be a mix of good students and some unmotivated students. Some students might turn to AI to help them with an assignment that they've left until the last moment, while other students won't consider it because they know that in the long run, the process of learning is what is important. And teachers will still be teachers. The best teachers have always looked for ways to challenge their students, to help them think critically, and to respond to the world around them. So while I know that there are a lot of interesting things that I could use ChatGPT or other generative AI programs to do in order to add a little something extra to my lessons, it isn't the first thing on my mind anymore. It's just another teacher's tool.
And as far as a tip goes, I would just have teachers be aware of, does using the AI in this instance align with my goals? Is it taking the place of my instruction, or is it aiding my instruction? All sorts of things to think about when you're using a new tool. But we shouldn't be afraid of AI. It's just another tool to have in the classroom. It's also not a silver bullet. It's not going to save everything. So take it all with a grain of salt. Use it how you use it.
I love that last quote. So wise. AI is not a silver bullet. Take it with a grain of salt. Use it how you use it. I think that's a great summary of what all our friends have really emphasized here. AI really is just another tool, a powerful one, but one we need to choose carefully, align with our objectives, right? We really have to emphasize that point. And importantly, we can't lose our minds over.
No. Great takeaway for today.
Yeah.
So on that note, let's hear one last closing word from our friend Dustin.
So Anna and Shay, thank you so much. Happy New Year. You two are awesome, and I really appreciate the podcast, and happy 2024.
Happy New Year. Happy New
Year.
Thank you to all of the wonderful friends of the podcast, new and old, who shared your voices and ideas for this episode. This episode is so special for us because it brings together so many different perspectives from teachers who are on the ground in diverse teaching contexts. We truly love hearing from you.
So, listeners, tell us your thoughts in the comments on YouTube, our social media channels, or via email at teacherthinkaloud@gmail.com. Which ideas resonated with you most? Who really made you think on this episode? Which ideas are you going to put in your back pocket and run with at the first opportunity in your classroom? Did this conversation spark any other fun ideas for using AI that you'd like to share with our community?
You're awesome, everyone. And once again, Happy New Year.
Happy teaching.
And happy reflecting.